Okay, start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Stacy, you want to lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Tim, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay.
I
Any
have a
dis-
question, though. Just on the donation, that's a large sum of money, $978. Usually it's $40.03. Is that, how would that be
Bigger.
used, just out of curiosity, for that one donation from Life Touch?
Let me find out and get back to you.
Yeah, it's a sizable amount, so it'd be nice to know how that's going to be utilized, if that offsets some budget items, wish list or whatever. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Audience of citizens? Does anyone would like to address the board from Zoom? Next is the Portland Public Schools Spotlight, and I understand that the presentation may be at our next meeting, so we will table that. Student Representative Report. Hi, Sean.
Hi everyone, it's just me for tonight. So I don't have really much to report other than we're starting midterms tomorrow, and that'll continue through next Monday, and so our second semester will be starting on Tuesday.
Wow.
No news is good news. Let's leave it there.
Yes, yes, that's nice. Okay. Well, thank you for the report.
Of course.
Okay, communications and updates. Superintendent's report.
Okay. All right. A few updates for you tonight. And I did put these in the Google Drive, and Meg was nice enough to make copies because I forgot and ran out the door before I loaded them up. First, let me start with, we have one resignation. Lindy Yeaton, one of our paraprofessionals at Valley View, has resigned. We wish her well. We've posted the position and are now in the process of filling that position. So again, we wish Ms. Yeaton well in her future career endeavors. Okay, I did include for you, and Meg made the copies of it, the most recent COVID statistics report, status report that we received from the Chatham Health District. This one is dated December 26th through January 8th. That's the most recent one, and the numbers are awful. Right, I mean, there's just more COVID now than ever before. I mean, you can see on that first chart there are 135 cases per 100,000. If you remember back in the early days of this, we were thinking 15 cases per 100,000 was going to be a lot. So there's an awful lot of COVID in the community. Now, I think the good news is, if our experiences are similar to what they were last year, we should start to see the drop like a cliff right now. And the most recent data that I saw from the state, something like a 17% positivity rate. So hopefully we're starting to see that. Hopefully we hit the plateau and are now, on the downswing of that. But I did share this with you. I thought you might find it interesting. The numbers are awful right now, but let's hope that they're about to quickly head in the correct direction.
Charles, I have just a quick question. Looking at the overall COVID vaccination rates by town,
Mm-hmm.
are they tracking boosters as well, or just the first and second doses? Do you know?
I'm pretty sure this is just fully vaccinated, which is still considered the first dose of Johnson & Johnson and the 2-dose regimen of Moderna and Pfizer. I haven't heard from Russ that they're tracking boosters yet. Now, whether the definition of fully vaccinated changes soon to include boosters,
Right.
that will have to be seen. Some people have already made that adjustment, but I think for Russ's reporting purposes, I think he's still considering it just the 2 rounds and not the booster.
Okay.
And I have a quick question on the guidance that was received, frequently asked questions.
Yep.
I've heard that, students may be required to get a doctor's certificate when they return to school after they've had COVID. Is that anywhere in the guidelines? I certainly couldn't find it. I wondered if that was, something the CIAC required. I'm just wondering what that would be, what that would look like if we had to have, students bringing doctor's certificates in saying they're able to return to school.
Yeah, so right now, we're not collecting doctor's notes.
Right.
It's that you finished the quarantine period, or,
Right.
in this case, let's make sure we have our terms right. So
Right.
isolation period is a
Right.
period of time for somebody who actually tests positive,
Right.
right? And that isolation period, as you know, went from 15 days to 8 with a negative test after 7, now it's down to 5, right? So we're not asking for a note from a pediatrician or a doctor's note to
Okay.
faculty or staff member. We're just waiting for that quarantine period to end, you
Right.
know. And there's a certain amount of trust involved in this, you
Sure.
know, that, you know, we're hoping people accurately tell us the date that they tested positive, or, of course, that people tell us that they tested positive,
Or
because,
that they were sick.
right, and that, because there's always the chance that, you know, if it's a home test or even a PCR test, people could just ignore it if it's positive, but.
And so we do accept the home tests or the PCRs, okay.
Yep, yep.
All right.
Um,
So that's, I guess that, there isn't a doctor's note at this point that's required, okay.
Correct, correct. So that actually, sort of one of my questions is related to the FAQ that I provided you. But first, let me just give you a sense of what happens in the schools when the numbers look like that. So we carefully track the number of positive cases that we have in the schools, both amongst students and faculty and staff. When the numbers are this high, what it looks like for our schools is that at Portland High School, since January 3rd, we've had 67 positive cases amongst students, and 6 staff members have reported positive. At the middle school, 34 students, 5 staff members. At Brownstone, 26 students, 3 staff members. Gildersleeve, it's 35 students, 1 staff member. And Valley View, it's 16 students, 2 staff members, right? And these are just the ones we know about now. So it's happening. I mean, there's just a lot of COVID in the schools. And, you know, the reality is, as part of that's why we made the decision not to do the contact tracing. Simply impossible to contact trace that number of positive cases. I mean, we would need exponentially more nurses, and that's all they would do is track down where the students have been. So, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, in some cases is confusing for people, that we're not contact tracing anymore. So at this point, nobody is hearing from the school that, as many of you parents at the table here have heard, you know, your student was a close contact, therefore you are quarantined, not isolating, but quarantined for a certain period of time. So we're not quarantining students anymore. But I do want to point your attention to, and I included it in the FAQ, because this is where it sometimes gets confusing for parents.
Mm-hmm.
The question here is, if schools are no longer doing contact tracing, which we've decided that we're not doing, for in-school exposures, can they all?
Number 2.
It's
Thank you.
question 2, which is, I think,
Yep.
the most
I
important.
didn't know where you were, I wanted to see it.
So if schools are no longer contact tracing for in-school exposures, can they also stop keeping track of appropriate quarantine/isolation durations and dates of return to activities for students, which is kind of like Meg's question, right?
Right.
And staff who have been identified as having COVID-19 or been directed to quarantine as a close contact? The answer to that is no, right? That schools that have been notified by health officials or individuals, parents, guardians of a student or staff member who has tested positive is in quarantine or is not participating within school learning due to symptoms that may be associated with COVID-19 should continue to monitor those individuals, enforce restrictions from in-person learning and other school activities according to the appropriate time schedule, and communicate when and what activities individuals can return. However, if notified of COVID-19 case who may have had contact with others in the school during their infection, period, schools no longer need to retroactively contact trace any possible close contacts that may have occurred during the school day. Schools that choose to discontinue contact tracing are strongly encouraged to put in place and utilize systems for notification of staff and families of positive cases, as indicated in the guidance documents. So what that means is that while we're not informing parents that their students are subject to quarantine periods, if the Chatham Health District tells us that the health officials in the Chatham Health District have done contact tracing, we would still enforce that quarantine period. And of course, if the Chatham Health District, or more likely a parent or the student themselves, notifies us of a positive case, we would enforce the isolation period. So what families won't hear from us anymore is that based on our contact tracing at any part of the school day, you're quarantined, but they may hear that from the health department. And if they hear that from the health department is notifying us of that, and we're, per these guidelines, enforcing that. So I just wanted to be clear, it's not like quarantine periods have disappeared entirely. They're still happening, but it's based on contact tracing that is happening in the community with health officials, largely at the Chatham Health District. So that's a little bit nuanced there. I just wanted to see if there were any questions, otherwise point that out to you.
So, my kid gets diagnosed with COVID.
Right.
And Laurel's kid sits next to him or her in class. She isn't notified that my child tested positive?
We are notifying at the school level. You'll see my emails go out that say the number of in each school, and occasionally our nurses, when they have a concern about whether it's a team sport or classroom setting, they'll notify at the holistic level. But what you would not get anymore is a call from the nurse saying, or actually, we're getting the call from the nurse saying, your child needs to quarantine from school because we're not doing those investigations anymore.
Got it.
I did get a letter today that said 2 children in your child's class have been diagnosed with COVID. Please look out for these symptoms in your children and be extra vigilant. And I just have to say, I really did appreciate that as a parent.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Did you get a test kit too?
I did not get a test
Okay,
kit.
they're available, and that's also a resource that you'll
Yeah.
be able to get.
I think that, since we've eliminated the contact tracing piece, that's a helpful piece for parents to feel fully informed and to know to be extra vigilant.
Right, right.
And I guess to the point that I was making about requiring a doctor's note, this basically says the school may put a timetable on when students come back to activities. So a kid who's on the basketball team, who was COVID, was at home, did not come into in-person learning, takes a negative test at home, says no symptoms, I don't have a fever, I'm coming back to play on the team, can he be restricted from participating? And so there is some policy or some statement that, okay, and would parents or kids know that ahead of time so that?
Right, so the difference here is that any, not isolation periods,
Right.
but quarantine periods. And generally, I have to, hope everybody understands, when we're talking quarantine, we're often talking about healthy students.
Right.
Students who are not showing any signs or symptoms, students who have not tested positive, but simply as a function of being in proximity with masks off, eating snack, or playing basketball, or whatever else, those periods have been subject to a school notification of your quarantine. Those are over, right? We're not doing those
You're not
anymore.
doing
Our nurses can't contact trace their way through this number
Right,
of cases.
understood that, right.
However, if the nurses have a concern, Russ Melman at the Chatham Health Department is always a resource for us. And
Okay.
he may do a contact tracing. And if he were to say, you're a close contact, I'm concerned, you need to quarantine, we're notified of that, then we would enforce it.
Okay.
When the quarantine period or isolation period is over, we're not asking for a doctor's note, we're just following the guidelines, and of course, those are different from sports and
Sure,
school activities.
Sure, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Charles, is there a return to play protocol for children that worked positive before they can go back into sports? I thought I heard something about
That's
they might
different,
need to be
yes.
checked out.
In those cases, because of the potential heart condition, then we're asking for doctor's documentation. I'd have to get the exact what we do, but our nurses are very much.
Yeah.
So part of what we've done is because we've taken all of this contact tracing off the nurses. It's not like they're not working their tails off. They are now just refocusing their effort on identifying students with signs and symptoms or helping students, appropriately take care of themselves when they return to play or class. So it's a lot.
That may be what was confusing the person who asked me. Maybe that's the protocol to return to play because the child is an athlete and would.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah, and that return to play, it's because COVID can have, other, blood clots or other terrible things.
Right,
So
right.
there's
right.
that
Okay,
component.
good point. All right. Well, that clarifies it. Hopefully parents are listening at home.
And the other piece of this, and I don't want to, raise too much alarm, it's almost common sense. With this number of positive cases, at this point, people have to assume that when you're in public, you're a close contact.
Yep.
Right, I mean, whether it's at the supermarket or classroom, with this amount of COVID that's going around, it has to be assumed, if you're in a room with more than 30 people, someone's gonna be asymptomatic and positive. What does that mean? That awareness, I hope, encourages people to keep the distance that's available, to wear their masks, and to, be safe, as safe as you can with this amount of virus spreading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions about that?
No, but I think it's important to get the information out and to make it clear because if nothing else, we're saving lives and we're saving school lives, educational lives as well as the lives of our students and our teachers, so.
For
Thank
sure.
you.
For sure. Well, I'll keep you posted. Hopefully, the next report we see from Russ has the numbers going down, which I think we're gonna see. Okay, a couple other quick ones. I have some good news. So, I can't remember the exact time, but a while ago now, may even have been late last year, I notified you that we were applying for security grants, right? Received notification, and I included the emails I've got. I haven't gotten the official letters yet, but I got the emails, and I shared those with you in the copies Meg made. We got $32,838 for, it's called the Interoperability Grant. Now, a little catch on this. We can only access that $32,838 if we come up with $32,838. Okay, it's a matching grant up to 50% rebate. Specifically, the grant was written to provide us better radios for our school. And the specific within the radios, it should give the police the opportunity to switch over to our frequency and communicate with us if there was ever an emergency. That is what the grant was for. It's called an interoperability grant. It's designed to get, all schools have radios. We all walk around with radios clipped on our belts. But our radios now are definitely not the most sophisticated radios. I won't call them toys, but they're not professional grade radios that, can travel long distances and otherwise have great communications. So this grant was designed to, if we got it, encourage us to purchase radios for our people that are really high-quality radios, such that in the event of an emergency, any responding officer could switch to our frequency and communicate with
On
us.
the channel, yeah.
So that's grant one. The second grant we received was round 5 school security, and we received $7,724 for that. Am I doing that right? I'm sorry, excuse me. We received $8,724 for that. That is a reimbursement for security upgrades that we've already done. Specifically, over the past couple of years, we've installed panic buttons and access scanner cards on the doors, and we've installed the Raptor system that allows us to screen visitors to make sure they're not on any registries we don't want them on, or and also to upgrade some of our PA systems. So this $8,724 is a reimbursement for that we could use for anything that we wanted to use it for. I spoke with Stephanie and Carl today. We're not going to do this right away, but we're going to watch the budget closely. And as we close in on the end of the year, if we have enough savings, I would like to bring a recommendation forward, and this still has to be worked out, to apply that $8,800 $724 towards the 50% share of the new radios, match it up with $22,000, potentially an end-of-year money, and leverage $60,000 worth of new radios for our administrators, faculty, staff, custodians, athletic coordinators, me, everybody who otherwise would then be able to communicate. So I thought I would share that with you. More details to come. We certainly aren't putting any POs out yet. Stephanie and I are watching the numbers carefully. And should we get to the end of the year and have enough left over, I think this would be a great investment in school security.
Great idea.
Okay, any questions for that?
I thought we had done some work on the PA system previously. Is that right or no?
Is that for the auditorium then, or is that?
Yes, this year we upgraded the sound system in the auditorium at the high school. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I thought because there was issues at Brownstone with the PA system and
There are still issues. As
so
of
that
today,
never
there
got,
are
the
issues.
decks never really got cleared on
Yeah.
that one.
No, if you ever want to come, see a real relic of PA systems, feel free to visit Brownstone or Gildersleeve. They're really something, especially Gildersleeve with all the wires coming out of them. I mean, it looks like something from the, 1940s.
Seeing Happy Days.
Yeah. Our school PA systems at Valley View, Gildersleeve, and Brownstone reflect the age of the buildings. They are in need of significant upgrades.
But we had done something where we had asked the Board of Selectmen to waive the bid requirement for some work, I remember.
Right. That may have been at the high school, middle school. I'd have to go back and research it.
Yeah,
There was
okay.
I
something
think
in
there
the
was work done at the
auditorium
high
up
school,
there.
middle school, that they were having some trouble just with
Right.
sound going
Yeah,
through.
that was the
classroom.
auditorium. We just did that project.
And we just did that.
Yeah, and that was because there's a certain cellular signal that
Right.
potentially could broadcast your conversation over the PA in the middle of a show. So we've upgraded that. Actually, I'm looking forward to this year's musical. We will have a big reveal of it.
Okay.
Okay, two more quick ones for you. We've signed the contract with Fryer Architects. Their team was here last Wednesday, met with Carl, Lou, and me, and I. We sat down with them, talked to them, gave them a sense of where the committee is, and just had a nice conversation about how the district has evolved to where it is now. And then we did a tour of all of our buildings. And I have been particularly in parts of Brownstone that I had never been in before. Especially that basement down there is, go
Yeah,
splunking. It's a
yeah,
fascinating place to be.
Not.
So they certainly, just as a function of that very initial look at the buildings, can see where we are, but they're going to be sending in over the next 4 to 6 weeks their technicians, their HVAC people, their building inspectors, their team of people qualified to come in and take a look under the hood and see where we are. But I'm excited. I will certainly keep you posted with that. We're in the right place. Contract signed. Relationship is being developed. We've provided the sightlines report to them. Walked them around so that people can put faces to names, and all of our secretaries know who they are, and showed them how to use the Raptor system and get their badges, and we're off and going. So stay tuned on that. And then the last thing is connected to that, Peter Prouda. So I had a conversation with Peter Prouda today. Okay, Peter and I exchanged phone tag a little bit. He finally got in touch with me. He's out in Utah right now. He is willing to come in and do a presentation of his report for us. I've tentatively scheduled him for February 15th. I still have to reach out to the Facilities Committee. I chose February 15th because that's when the Facilities Committee is scheduled to meet next. It's at 7 p.m. I would love to have a joint Facilities Committee, Board of Education, invite Board of Selectmen, others to come in and have Peter present the report to us. So I still have a little bit of logistics work to do. I'll let you know the firm date, but tentatively scheduling February 15th. I asked Mr. Prouda if he included the new development, Brainerd development over here. He said he did not, and we talked about that. He said, certainly I see that as a concern, and he gave me a good recommendation. His recommendation was that I reach out to the developer of that new development and ask him for an enrollment impact analysis, right? That they should have a sense, based on the 1 and 2 bedroom nature of the development, who they're going to be marketing those to, and then their experience with similar developments in towns like Portland, and should be able to give us a pretty good sense of how many additional students we would anticipate from that development. I spoke with Ryan Curley today. Ryan was nice enough to introduce me to the gentleman who's in charge of that. I emailed that gentleman today and asked him if he could provide me that enrollment impact analysis. Once I get that, I'm going to share it with Peter. Peter Prouda said, yeah, that's something I missed. And he's going to help me decipher that and update his numbers with the potential numbers that we would be looking at from that development.
Will we have that by the 15th?
I expect we'll have that by the 15th.
And also, there's an 11 houses planned up in Upper Cox Road in the hinterlands. That would also require maybe some analysis by Peter Prouda.
Yeah.
Because that would be 3 or 4 bedroom houses, homes probably.
Yeah, for sure. So my goal is to work with Peter, gather that information so that the numbers he presents on the 15th are updated in his report to give us a sense of what we're looking at over the next 10 years.
Good.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Just as a FYI, back when the original developer came in, I'm being the liaison of the selectmen, they did talk about the impact, they're talking about the fire department, everything like that. They estimated somewhere between 20 and 30 students
Okay.
on the way they've designed it, so you probably, unless that's changed, you'll probably get something in that range, I would suspect.
That's my memory too, Dave.
Yeah.
But it's all really important to look at.
Yeah.
So, you know, my goal is to make sure we have a comprehensive look by
Yeah.
February 15th, you know, because as we're developing a master plan, that is, in terms of ed specs and square footage we need and just about everything else, that
Everything
is
else hinges on the
essential
number
data.
of kids. Yep.
So, I'm comfortable that over the next 4 weeks, we'll start pulling that together and make sure that the demographic analysis Peter did reflects that development, which is the first time hearing about it,
Yeah.
and the one down here.
Yeah, they alluded to it, but planning and zoning did finally approve it, and I don't know who told me that, but we were somewhere, I was somewhere, and they said they had already approved it, so those lots are for sale, I would imagine,
Okay.
up on Upper Cox Road or Cox
So-
Road,
Great town to come live. I can't imagine they'll have a hard time selling it.
I know.
But you're saying, you seem to be saying is that he will not be updating his report to reflect what he missed. He's just gonna help you
He and I will work
put the
together.
numbers together? or
Yeah.
it's just- So the report won't change?
It will. I think when he and I spoke today, he recognized that was something that his numbers don't reflect but should. And-
Okay, yeah, that's what I heard that, but then I also heard that he was just gonna help you come
Yeah,
up with.
he asked me to get the name of the developer, reach
Yeah,
out
yeah.
to the developer, get this enrollment impact that he says most developers have.
Right, no, I understand all that, but
Yeah.
he will go the next step and he will provide an updated
Oh, yeah.
report.
Correct.
That incorporates that data.
That's the goal.
That's
Yeah.
great, thank
Yeah.
you.
Correct.
Thank you.
Next is business and financial affairs. I understand Stephanie may be on Zoom. Hi
Hello.
Stephanie, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So I uploaded everything to you guys. If there's any questions about what is there.
That's the big thing, deep into the fire,
I can go over anything, I just didn't know if anybody hasn't read it yet.
No, I think it looks very good, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to talk as least as possible, just because I keep coughing, and it's hard, so that's why I'm very short on words. of right now looks pretty good. Again, just a few accounts that I noted that I would be watching, but overall, we are in a healthy position.
That's good.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I would, I'm just wondering, and I know we don't separate out the substitute teacher, numbers, but if you could give us an idea, if not today, send it, for the next meeting, just to let us know how that's running, if we're running high on substitute teacher salaries.
So I can say that, because I usually do my projections at the end of each week, so when I ran them on Friday, it'll be through January, we budget about 206,000 for substitutes, and we are at about 72,000 that we've spent.
Oh, good. Okay, all right.
So we're not even at half yet.
Okay. And we're halfway through the month, so that's a good
Right.
thing. No, I think we're right where we should be, and I think we're in good shape. Thank you for, the due diligence that you do. I think we don't appreciate how you do that, how you do those, that magic.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Director of Student Services report. Hi,
Hi,
Dawn.
good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
This is what happens when you comb your hair with your fingers. Let's not do that again. Yeah, I look at my picture and they're like, oh my gosh, my hair's standing up. That's not good.
I thought you had a new,
I
I thought you had a new
have a
hairdo.
nice, short and sweet, report for tonight. Just a quick update on numbers. We have, not a tremendous change. We've gone from 218 students in special education to 224. Probably one of the more notable changes is one increase in outplacement. And then the others are just some additional, new students that were identified. And our students with 504 plans went from 85 to 87. And we have 43 students that are listed as EL learners. So not a big change, but if you remember, our changes tend to take place in the big growth tends to take place in the springtime. So our student services teams are working really hard. I keep reporting on the mental health challenges that are going on. I just alluded to the fact that we had one outplacement. We have several students right now that are really struggling socially and emotionally, and some of those are going to result in a diagnostic placement. What that means is that just is a placement in a therapeutic day program that is a higher level of care than what we have like in the Bridge program or the Harbor program for kids that are really struggling. And as one of my colleagues pointed out as a principal, she pointed out the fact that we've worked a lot with overall with all of our kids, the changes and the needs coming back to school in person and everything that's gone on the first half of this year. But now we've got a couple of kids that are really struggling and requiring that outplacement. The other thing around mental health that we've done over the last couple of months is I told you last year that some of the clinicians we were hiring were school psychologists versus being school social workers. And we're hiring now for that title of a clinician, but we're hiring the right person, whether they're a social worker or a psychologist. But one of the nice things about having psychologists in some of the and extra psychologists in the buildings is we're getting psychologists that can do student assessment. So we've been restructuring our 4 school psychologists, the 2 that have been with us for quite some time, Lisa Venturelli and Lisa Kaczynski. And they're assigned to schools. And then we also have our 2 new school psychologists. That's Kelsey Lisk, who's in the Bridge program, and Alyssa Donegar, who's at Valley View, also doing some school assessment. So that's really nice for us is when we look at the evaluations that school psychologists do, things such as psychoeducationals, cognitive testing, behavior rating scales, autism testing, things like that. We have people that instead of people just running all over the district testing random students, whoever comes up next, they're working with students in their buildings. the principals have been, the 5 building principals have been great to work with to just take a look at that picture. In addition, we've been working with Mari Wrightington as a consultant, and she's been helping us with a lot of that as well. So I think it's just spreading out the knowledge and the wealth of the testing and all of that across all 5 buildings a little more evenly. The other thing that I just wanted to bring your attention to is also I've been surveying the special ed teams this month as far as what professional development they've been taking part in. A lot of things that used to cost us hundreds of dollars to send a special ed teacher off to learn about a new reading program or a tried and true reading program. Now, a lot of these things, because of virtual learning, has become available online, and some of these programs have been free, so it's been great. I mean, people have been really jumping ahead and jumping in and taking advantage of some of these testing. So we're actually, for the first time in many years, we have special ed teachers that are being trained in Wilson Reading, Orton Gillingham, Linda Mood Bell, all of those scientifically highly proven programs to help our readers, and especially our dyslexic readers, our struggling readers. So it's really exciting, and they're really aggressive about taking advantage of this training. So that's a little update from us. Like I said, all the programs, all our special programs are up and running and really quite filled up. And then the next thing that we're doing is we're getting ready for extended school year. So we hold our annual reviews and get students' IEPs ready for the summer. We're talking about extended school year. Remember, that's our mandated special ed summer school that is driven by the students' IEPs. And then just a little update on our CT SETS programming. Again, that's the new IEP that's going to be taking over, that we'll be transitioning to on July 1st. We have about half of our special ed staff and some of our gen ed staff is taking part in training right now, and then the other half are going to do the training in March. So they're learning about the new IEP, what the form looks like, the crosswalk between the old form and the new form. By next month, my presentation next month, I'll be able to show you a little bit about, what we've been learning, what the new form is going to look like. So everybody's excited to be tackling that training. So that's all I really have for tonight. Like I said, short and sweet, and just a little update on the hard work that everybody's doing in student services.
Great.
Any questions?
Yep, I have a question, Dawn. On the struggling students, were they, and I know you can't speak specifically, but are these kids who have just come to the surface, who have serious mental health issues that need the diagnostic school placement? Or are they kids that were in the Harbor, the Wheeler program at some point and it just didn't work? I mean, is that filled up right now with students and we don't have a place for them? Is that why they're being outplaced?
No, everybody that we're looking at a diagnostic outplacement are kids that, most of them were not in Harbor or Ridge. Okay. They were coming from either mainstream special ed or not in special ed at all. Okay. And have, their mental health needs have escalated to the point that they need, a therapeutic setting. Okay. I'm anticipating most of them are not going to be out forever. That's why I said we're looking at diagnostic placements to do some further evaluation and really get a good handle on what's going on with their needs and moving forward. But no, I will tell you, Harbor is pretty full. That's our 7-12 program. They've taken on, I think we may have 1 or 2 openings left, but they're pretty full. And Bridges is being able to transition some kids back to their mainstream buildings quite a bit, and they're being quite successful. So, not that I want to advertise it, there's lots of room at the inn. There is potential to taking kids that may need that support.
Well, good. Okay, that's good to know, and obviously keep us abreast of that, because when you do fill up the house and you need more room, we have to look at that as well. Hopefully we don't.
Yeah. Hopefully, and this pandemic's tough on everybody, and we know our youngest people, some of them are really struggling with some of that, coming back to school. Yes. Any other questions?
Yeah,
or
Dawn,
any other thoughts?
Dawn, I just had a question on the new IEP form. That's that's a software program, is that right? Is that where you put in all the data and?
It's two-stage, Tim, that's a great question. The students' IEPs are going to be different. The state is adopting a different form. So there's been a panel from all over the state that's been working on what the new form's going to look like. And that's stage one, and that's what we're all learning right now, and we'll be learning up until June. The other piece that's changing is the platform. That's the CTSEDS. That is the platform that all of the IEPs will be warehoused in. That's how we'll write them. And it's also where all of the state information that we usually have to go in and input.
Right.
Things like CDAC and evaluation timelines and all that. Now it will all just be pulled right from that platform.
Okay, yeah,
So
thanks.
it's twofold. We have to learn both. We have to learn the new IEP, the form itself, and then we have to learn the new platform.
Right, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Dave, any questions? No?
I'm good.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
You too, Dawn.
You too.
All right, new business. There are policies. I don't know, I'm just gonna ask to see who had time to take a look at these. They weren't uploaded until this afternoon.
Yeah,
I mean-
I know I've looked at them because I'm on policy, but otherwise.
I read through them once, but not enough to really dive in.
I figure I could walk you through them. It won't take too much time. Why don't, if you'd like, I can walk you through them, talk about the changes. This is first read tonight, so that I can answer any questions, and then, we can put them on, obviously, for second read the next time. But I did include a cover memo, but otherwise, I think it's worth an investment of 15 minutes or so to just kind of run through them, make sure you understand the implications, and otherwise I can fill you in on how we're going to operationalize each of these.
Okay?
So let's do it. So the first one I have is bus driver regulations. Specifically, as you know, all of our bus drivers are drug tested and alcohol tested at hire, and then periodically during the course of their employment. So this is a legislative change that requires us to check a clearinghouse. It is called the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. What this means is that if I'm a bus driver in Massachusetts and I'm relieved of my position because I failed drug tests, and then I come down to Portland and want to get a job, the employer in Massachusetts is required to submit the name of that individual to this clearinghouse, and our employer is required to check it. Right? And then, of course, if we ever had to terminate a bus driver for failing drug or alcohol screens, we would enter that information into the clearinghouse. So if they went to another state, California or Arizona, and tried to seek employment there, they would see why they lost their position potentially here in Portland. So this is a statutorily required change. I spoke with John Hipshire at M&J. They're aware of it and are already doing this. So it's in place already. The policy implications are simply a matter of us updating our policy to reflect that change.
I think
So
it's
what
probably just a typo, but, is the date supposed to be 1/18/22?
Oh, yes,
on the
thank you.
memo?
Good catch. I probably have it on every single one
That's
like
all
that,
right.
too. Yeah, that's what happens when you copy and paste a document. That's just my
So,
mistake.
and what you're seeing in red is the changes that would be made. That's the language that is being put into the policy, just so you can see what the change is and what it's going to look like.
Good with that one? All right, next one, let's take a look at, let's do it in order on the agenda here. We have 6172, it's an instructional policy, parent and family engagement for Title I schools. So we are a Title I school district, specifically Valley View Elementary School received Title I funding. I did share that amount with you on the presentation I made last week on the budget. We used that funding specifically to pay for reading intervention services at Valley View. This is a policy change that requires us that we engage parents and members of the community both in the design of that those services, and then of course in the ongoing evaluation of those services. So we already have a 6172 policy. I did include that here for you. That is our current policy. My recommendation, and I think this is the recommendation of the policy committee, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Meg, Laurel, or Tim, is that we take the CABE model policy and replace our policy with that. So what we included here, I don't know if it's, I have to go back to this up here, is you have two policies. You have our policy, and then you have the CABE model policy. For the sake of convenience and ease, it's just easier to take our policy, rip, and replace with the CABE model policy. And that will bring us into compliance with those expectations. And again, this is a required policy change. It's not something that we exercise a lot of prerogative over, unless, of course, which I wouldn't recommend, we decided not to accept Title I funding, which I would suggest would be a great move. I think
The policy, P6172.4, parentheses A, is our existing policy.
Correct.
And then the next thing I see is CABE policy services is a regulation.
Oh, boy, is it?
I don't see a new policy,
I
just
caught
the
that too.
regulation.
Wait,
what I'm looking
the
at.
school level
The
family
regulation is-
engagement compact?
Well, there's policies.
Yeah, no, she's right, it's a regulation.
You're right.
Policies and
Yeah, it's
regulations are
not the
two
policy.
different.
Okay.
So were they recommending that we, I'm just,
think
yeah,
so.
I was trying to understand what the key recommendation was, were they saying we don't, yeah, I don't know. Was there a policy that went along with this that we just didn't get?
Yeah, I gotta go back and find that. Good catch. These are the regulations, but we'll adopt those too. So
right.
let me get you the policy language. You're right. All that I have included here is the CABE regulation. I have to go back and change the policy, get the policy for you.
Do we have existing regulations? 'Cause we
What you
should
have
probably
here is
look
what
at-
we currently have.
That's just the policy.
Right. That's all that,
There is a regulation in the back of it.
and then in the back of
There
it.
is a regulation
It's
for
an,
it.
it's an
Oh,
appendix.
like I said, I didn't get a chance to read it, so I don't know.
But you are correct. What I included here is the CABE regulation, but not the policy. So what you have here is our policy and regulations, but what you have here is only the regulations. So I've got to get the policy too.
Good.
But
All
I don't
right.
think it changes the recommendation, though, that we replace our policy and regulations with the CABE model policy and regulations. But it is important for you to see the first part of that.
Would it be helpful to, just send out the corrected documents and then
Yes.
table these?
Yeah.
So read them and make your questions and more to come.
Policy. Got it. Okay, should I move on to the next one?
Sure.
All right, so the next one, policy 4118.232, personnel, which is alcohol, drugs, and tobacco-free workplace. Okay, so this is for our faculty and staff. As you are likely aware, the laws changed regarding cannabis. So cannabis is now available for people over 21 as for recreational consumption. However, much like tobacco and alcohol, it is not something we would allow our employees to use on the job, right? So what I have for you here is our current 4118.232, and then I have the CABE model language. The CABE model language updates our policy to reflect the statutory changes in the new law for recreational cannabis. Again, same idea with the Title I. Just to bring us right up, let's replace our policy with the language from the CABE policy, and otherwise that will make a nice, clean adjustment as opposed to having to go in and tweak every reference in our policy with respect to drugs and alcohol. I also prefer the CABE policy because I like the definitions. And one of the things also in the CABE policy is it does ban the use of electronic cigarettes, which our policy currently doesn't, I believe, reference because it was written, I think, before electronic cigarettes came out. But in general, the spirit of the policy is alcohol, tobacco, and drugs don't have a place on school grounds during the school day or at school-sponsored events and activities. I like to think that's common sense, but we need a policy in any event to make sure that we govern that.
So this actually, this is something I was wondering, and this kind of reminds me. We had a problem with vaping a few years ago at the middle and high school. I haven't heard anything about it in a while. Are masks actually helping with that? I mean, are we still seeing an issue with vaping during class?
You know, I tell you what, I would love to engage particularly Kate, Chuck, and Allison about that, but you're right. You know, that, I think it was far more pronounced maybe 2 years ago than it is now, but before I go on record saying that, I would like to have a conversation with Kate, Chuck, and Allison to find out if that is an accurate statement, which I hope it is. So why don't I ask them that question? They're on right now, and I'm sure that they're chomping at the bit to say, unmute me, and let me answer that, but we're talking about policy now and not necessarily
Right.
vaping. But there certainly is a important conversation to have in there as to whether, I hope, and we have some sitting right over here, our teenagers are getting the message that vaping is just another way for big tobacco to get you addicted to their terrible product. So-
I would add that vaping right now is a big DEMIS promotion, and Youth Services is planning to have in March, I believe, a vaping
Yeah.
workshop for parents and teachers.
You know what I envision? A great Portland spotlight coming up.
Sounds
So
good.
Maybe
Yeah.
we'll invite
What's the
our
big issue?
drug and alcohol people and have a discussion about what we're seeing. I think that would be a great discussion.
Yeah, it would,
Charles, back to the policy quickly, on page G, there's optional CBD product language, and I'm just curious whether you're recommending we keep that language or not.
Is I think it came out of, didn't we talk about taking that out of the fact?
no.
Which one is that?
Are you talking about our
Page
policy?
G,
I'm
page
sorry,
policy,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
optional language.
No, I was gonna cover, actually, a policy, I was gonna talk about students in CBD, but yeah, I think that our committee decision was to keep CBD in there.
It was,
Yeah.
that needs to be removed.
So you should remove the word optional.
Right. Correct. All right, so again, a good policy update, keep us consistent with current legislation while still prohibiting the use of drugs, alcohol, electronic cigarettes, cannabis during school hours, at school events, etc. All right, so following right along, this is the one I was head to. This is the one for students, right? Students, alcohol, drugs, tobacco, including performance-enhancing drugs. So, same thing. Again, that the laws involving cannabis changed. We have to update our policy. So, in here, you'll note we're not recommending a full replace, but an update of our policy. It is. It's not paginated. You'll see the red text.
Just go to the red tab.
Yeah, a little further in. What's important to note about this are well, two things here. One, this does enable us to take disciplinary action against students for drug and alcohol use off school grounds if it creates a disruption to the educational environment, right? That's important. Certainly we're not, policing the community, but, if a student were particularly selling or distributing drugs and alcohol in the community, and that was starting to affect Kate or Chuck or Allison's ability to effectively keep students safe, we could, exercise our authority over that student's conduct for off-campus conduct. Also, what's interesting about this is we would still hold a student accountable if we caught them using, possessing, selling, distributing marijuana. But because the law has changed, it's explicit now that we couldn't treat marijuana any differently than we treat alcohol, right? Generally speaking, in the past, if a student was caught with alcohol, they may be more likely to be suspended, whereas if a student were caught with marijuana, they may be more likely to be expelled, right? This changes that so that now, if we're going to expel a student for marijuana, we would also have to expel them for alcohol, similarly with marijuana. That probably wasn't as succinct as I needed to, but did you catch the gist of that?
Yes.
And again, that's a reflection of how the laws have changed regarding regulating cannabis use in Connecticut.
Is Kate recommending that language about use or possession off school premises be included in the policy?
That was the highlighted language in the model policy that was not in ours. So when the policy committee took a look and sort of did a crosswalk between CABE's model policy and ours, we found that bullet 3 and 4 wasn't there. So we figured while we're updating the policy, we might as well be explicit about off-campus uses.
Oh, here, okay. Next is Fafsa.
Okay, so the next one, Fafsa. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Fafsa is the Federal Financial Aid Forum. This is a new policy. We currently do not have a policy 6148 Fafsa completion. But we are, per state statute, required to have a policy that encourages students to complete the Fafsa form. It's actually one of the things that shows up on our next generation accountability. I spoke with Kate Lawson about this policy, and we will have no problem with it. Majority of our students go on to college, and certainly our counselors work closely with families to make sure they avail themselves of all of the resources to help, offset that tuition. So I'm very comfortable with this policy. We're doing it whether it's policy or not, but we could certainly incorporate this, no sweat.
So this is something that would be within the guidance counselor's responsibilities.
Absolutely. It's something that students generally do in their junior and senior year as they start that very important college search process. Maybe you've filled out the FAFSA forms yourself, I'm imagining?
I was gonna say, when I had two. Yeah, I had two boys that, when we went through that counseling with the social workers, that was a key part of the presentation, was to complete the FAFSA and get it done.
Yeah, key part. Yeah. And the research suggests that, people who complete the FAFSA are more likely to go on and avail themselves of the resources and go to college. So I think that the laws encouraging folks to complete the FAFSA are designed to encourage folks to go on to 2 or 4 year degrees.
Right, and even if you're not eligible for federal grants, it can be a key to eligibility for grants at the college itself. They want to see that FAFSA done so that they know where you sit relative to others.
Yep. So it's good practice, and we are very much already doing that. So it's always nice when you have a policy that's not going to be a lot of work for you. And the last one. So this is going to seem a little bit counterintuitive. The policy committee had some troubles over this one. So as part of our non-discrimination policy, at the time of, the laws have changed, so that clearly we've had a policy that says we don't discriminate against people based on age, right? That's not something we would do. This policy requires us, during the application process, when we're reviewing candidates' CVs, to no longer request any information that might help us in determining a person's age. So we can't ask for a person's birth date, which we don't. We can't ask for a person's age, which we don't. And we are gonna have to change our application form where we can no longer ask a person when they graduated college, right? The logic being subtract 22 from that number and you could figure out a person's age, right? So we use AppleTrack as our system to manage our hiring process. Meg is working with AppleTrack. We currently do ask people when they earned their degrees. We're gonna take that off. Now, we're still gonna request transcripts, and transcripts generally have on there the date when degrees are conferred. So, you know, unless colleges change their transcripts and don't provide us that anymore. But I'm not overly concerned. We'll take that off of the hiring application. We'll be compliant with this, and I can pretty much guarantee you that at no time do I think we're engaged in any age discrimination. So you'll see the language in red, tweaking our current policy so that we're not collecting that information. Oh, and also, as we go through these policies where we find people's names, like Dawn Davis or Philip O'Reilly, we're slowly going through the process of removing names and just having titles there, so that, you know, we don't have to update our policy book every time a new person comes on board. So that's the other thing you'll see in there in terms of a change. So just in closing, the policy committee reviewed and discussed all of these. Once we're through these, in terms of the updates, we'll be up to date with all of the required changes that came out of state law. So we're in pretty good shape. I don't want to speak for the policy committee, but I think we're pretty comfortable with these adjustments, and otherwise feeling pretty good in terms of where we are. Now we can go towards the not required, but ones that otherwise were, you know, merit good discussion.
Okay, so they'll be on our next agenda. 21-22 Board of Ed Goals Mid-Year Review. That's going to be done in executive session, as is the superintendent's mid-year review. So we'll skip over those, go to old business, and I see that there's nothing there. So, committee reports. Curriculum.
We are meeting tomorrow,
Yes, we are.
and we'll be discussing the future of the curriculum committee.
Yep.
So did I miss an email because there was some talk about changing that date because there was another?
The personnel subcommittee negotiation session was canceled,
Okay.
so
Thank
I
you.
believe that you were
So we're
included.
still,
I thought you
I
was
might
too.
have, I don't know when everything came through. I saw an email that said they were asking about another date, so I just wanna make
Yeah,
sure,
it
cause
was
I have to
maybe
clear.
early this afternoon that,
Perfect, thank you.
Policy?
Well, obviously, we've been hard at work, and it's just the beginning, but we did set some calendar dates, and we will be meeting on the third Wednesday of every month for the next, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so that we will be able to get our work done and the backlog that we have, and be able to move forward with the newest CADE updates as we go forward in July. So we will be bringing you new policies and updated policies through the end of winter and spring.
Great. Personnel, as you just heard, we had a negotiation session. We had to cancel tomorrow, so we're gonna keep plugging on the contracts negotiations and hopefully have something to report in the near future, hopefully February. Building and grounds,
Building and grounds. Do you have anything to report?
No.
nothing? Okay, oh, did we?
Matter of fact, I think we need to get a meeting on the
Yeah, we do.
calendar.
Yep.
Conservation and Renewable Task
That
Force
should
is
be
still
off.
here, right?
Check that out.
We abolished that. didn't
Meg
we?
didn't catch up with us on that.
Yep.
Strong
I
one.
just sent her an email.
Banished.
Yes.
Correct liaison?
Meeting tomorrow, and they are doing a remote meeting. They were in person through the fall, and they are doing a remote meeting tomorrow.
Okay, selectmen?
Nothing significant.
Committee on Solidarity?
I think our next meeting is February 8th at 7, which
Okay.
I think,
They had a meeting last Tuesday that
They-
we weren't able to attend because we were here at a budget meeting.
right.
But I did get a chance to touch base with April, and she noted that they're going to be reaching out to Eric shortly in the near future about working on a collaboration around holding some youth forums, and that they will be releasing their follow-up survey this coming week. You can look for that.
Lauren, anything on equity and inclusion?
Nothing new, no.
Okay. School Facilities Study Committee,
We're meeting on the 15th of February, and actually that's a change. We were supposed to meet on the 14th, but we changed the date, and hopefully we'll have the Peter Prouda demographic or enrollment report.
so that's gonna be a joint meeting with us, correct?
Yes, the joint
Okay.
meeting with the Board of
Great.
Selectmen, and
Tentative,
the Board of
yes,
Education, and the Facility Study Committee.
Hold the date, right?
Yep.
And Youth Services Advisory Board,
I don't have a date for the next meeting yet, so.
Okay.
I'll have Jesse get a hold of you. It's January 22nd, I believe.
Great.
Next Tuesday at 4:30.
Thank you.
Yeah.
any audience of citizens, anybody like to address the board? Okay. Board of Ed member comments, Dave, any comments?
No?
No?
Good.
Meg,
Nope, we're good tonight.
Laurel?
Yeah, I had just one thing I wanted to ask about that I've been thinking about, I've been hearing my daughter talk about some assessments in school, and was thinking that I don't feel like I have a comprehensive view of assessments in our district, what the calendar looks like, when there are, what is optional, what is required, when practice tests are happening. I just thought it might be a helpful thing for the board to hear at some point, or to be able to visualize what that assessment calendar looks like for our district.
When you say assessment, you mean student assessments or
Student.
teacher?
I was referring to
assessments?
student assessments, but,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that something
Yeah.
everybody?
Yeah,
Is there other
I
interest?
think curriculum.
Yeah, and I would love to hear about
Something
teacher
close to that.
assessment as well, actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Can I make a suggestion for that? I can send an email right now. We have a comprehensive assessment calendar, of course, so we have all that laid out. I'd love to make that a centerpiece of Eric's next report to you.
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
Stacy, any comments?
No, other than I do have the date for the youth services. I just checked my calendar.
Good.
It's
That's
January 25th at 4:30.
Okay. Great. Tim, any comments?
Yeah, I would just to go and talk about the equity and inclusion briefly. I know we already covered that in liaisons, but there was a meeting just this past week of the equity and inclusion, the first meeting since the adoption of the equity statement. And there was a lot of good discussion ensued from that. But one of the things that came from that is, at the end, was the need for more participation from the community, is to get people involved, is to have, whether it's parents, students, I think they're good on the faculty and staff piece, but other people in the community, I think it's, to the extent we can encourage that outreach for people to reach out to Eric and express interest in that we should, and help, hopefully get more engagement, because this is where the rubber meets the road kind of portion of the work, and it's important that you have some deep roots in the community.
Tim, is Eric actively looking for more community participants?
He
Because
sent it out in an email. I don't know if it went to.
I don't know that I would call it active, right?
Yeah, well, he's
asking us to
identifying,
ask people.
there weren't as, there was concern about the number of people who were able to make the last meeting. In the
Right.
end, I don't know how many people showed up, like 14 maybe or something, but they did envision a larger group.
Yeah.
And I think in the email he sent out, he talked about just, they're looking, they only have 2 students, but they'd like to have as many as 10.
Right.
They have 3 parent goal, but they only have 1. They have 3 district administrators they wanted, but presently it's only 2. They have 5 district certified staff, but they've got 6, so they're doing okay. 2 Board of Ed members, which were Lauren and I, and then they wanted 3 community members, and currently they have 1, and they wanted 26 people in all, and we have 14. So there's a 12-person goal.
So have you encouraged, or maybe you might want to encourage Eric, because I heard initially when he was forming this committee from several parents who were disappointed not to get invited onto the committee when they
Right.
expressed interest. I wonder if he would just reach out to folks who expressed
Again.
interest early on and say, listen, we've got some openings now. those
Yeah.
folks might still
That's a
very
great
much
idea.
be wanting to participate.
Oh, sure, well, if he's on here now, he can hear it.
They don't
But,
seem-
yeah, definitely, yeah, I'll bring that up.
Bring it up
Yeah,
to
go
them.
back,
Yeah.
cycle back to the
Yeah.
people who originally reached out
Yeah.
and maybe didn't
Yeah,
come
I
through,
think
yeah.
you might find some people who would jump on board.
So that was my only comment.
Okay, Lauren, anything?
Yeah, I have a few things. I'm sure we all saw in the news that there was a 13-year-old student in Hartford that recently died of a fentanyl overdose in school. I just want to say that my thoughts and my heart go out to his family and to the students and the staff of the Sport and Medical Sciences Academy in Hartford. Tying in with the vaping question, I guess I would personally love to hear from our admin about what is going on in our schools with drugs and alcohol and vaping and cigarettes. I just feel like that's something we haven't really been talking about. You know, we've been very focused on the pandemic, obviously, and I think it would be great to hear about that as another aspect of student health and safety. I would also like to consider, totally changing directions here, adding technology as a component to the curriculum committee. When we think about the curriculum committee, and Eric is so deeply involved in it, he is the curriculum and technology director, and I think it would be nice to have a part of the board have some oversight over, you know, all of these devices and to know what software we're using, and I just feel like that would be something I would like to talk about further. And then I also wanted to thank Tricia, our new recording secretary, because her notes are absolutely phenomenal from the meeting, so thank you so much.
Yeah, I told her that on the way in.
So good. Thank you.
Okay, is there a consensus about hearing more about, student health and safety, I guess, for lack of a better title? Is that
I-
something others would like to see on a future agenda?
Sure, yes.
Yes.
Could I add a suggestion to that too?
Mhm.
Could I make a presentation from our administrators about that? It's not really a spotlight, but I think that, you know, it is, you know, our, you know, health curriculum, our efforts to identify students and help students who are dealing with various, you know, cycles of recovery or addiction. I think that would be an interesting thing for the community to hear about and you to hear about. And I do see that as a nice fit for the spotlight. I think the one I had in mind we can push off, it was about security. Maybe if I make that a spotlight for our next meeting, would that be the appropriate time, or would you like to see that as an agenda item, either under superintendent's report communications? How would you like me to present that information to you?
I think a spotlight is fine.
And I would also add that Youth Services is trying to, Jesse's going to meet tomorrow with all the health and the social workers to try to talk about a survey that Youth Services would do about attitudes and behavior, which would include at-risk behavior, because we don't have a good idea at Youth Services what those risk behaviors are. And obviously, the laws changed with marijuana, and that has not been clearly worked out yet, and I don't know how that will affect, I mean, it won't affect 18 and below, but certainly getting that information out is important. There is money, there's a grant, a local prevention grant for money to sponsor information gathering and also sharing with the schools, which I think is the, you know, natural place to go and find out what that risk behavior is and what it looks like. So, you know, I think Jesse could come back and talk about it as well, but I think it's a good beginning, and we're just beginning to say, okay, COVID, mental health, but now what are the, and we know that there's been an increase in suicide attempts and other things within the young people, 7th through 12th grade or whatever. There's a lot of things that are beyond their control, so I think we have to address the risk behavior.
Agreed.
Okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session for purpose of board and superintendent mid-year reviews, inviting Dr. Britton?
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it. Meg,
All in
got it?
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.